Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Double Pipcast. This is a very special episode of the Double Pipcast where I interviewed Drew Nolosco, the global brand manager for the Transformers trading card game and an employee at Wizards of the Coast. We go through Drew's background in the gaming industry, we talk about the Transformers trading card game and how it was developed, how it's currently developed, and we even touch on some really cool exclusive information about the future of the Transformers trading card game, including the launch of War for Cybertron Siege 2. Hopefully you enjoy, and here we go. Hey everybody, I'm here with Drew Nolosco, who is the global brand manager for the Transformers trading card game and a employee at Wizards of the Coast. How are you doing today?
Hey everybody, I am doing great. I am talking to you from Magic Fest Vegas.
Awesome. Drew and I were just talking about Magic Fest Vegas, and Drew, what do we have going on at Magic Fest Vegas?
There's tons of stuff, but I'm here because Transformers trading card game is testing out Learn to Play at a Magic Fest for the first time, and so far it's been going okay.
That's awesome. So, Drew, rolling right into it, how did you come to work for Wizards of the Coast?
My background is in licensed gaming and particularly kids gaming and kids TCGs that have a TV show that's part of them. So I had done some work at other companies. I've been in the game industry for, doing math, about 18 years. No, close to that. And Wizards was starting up a new American kids trading card game called Kaijudo, and they were looking for a game designer, which is my background, who had experience in working on kids trading card games, which have an accompanying TV show. And you can imagine the number of people who have had that experience is pretty slim. So I joined Wizards to be originally the lead developer, and then later the lead designer and world builder for the Kaijudo game. And then after that, I've done a few things at Wizards, but the thing in common is they are all focused around the non-Magic. Well, that's not even true. Magic trading card game, Learn to Play, or trading card games that are for a little bit more of a younger or casual audience.
Okay, awesome. So Kaijudo was the first project that you worked on at Wizards?
Yes, and I worked on that for a number of years. I was also the lead designer for Magic the Gathering on iOS, Xbox, and Steam for a while. That brand name was called Magic Duels. I've also done work on a number of other Learn to Play projects and engagement. And then when a number of us were talking with Hasbro about the possibility of a Transformers trading card game, I took over the reins of that.
Wow, that's awesome. And safe to say that you enjoy it quite a bit?
It is a blast. I grew up as a Transformers fan. So not only is this an awesome professional fit for me, but from a personal geek life interest, it's the bee's knees.
Oh yeah, I could imagine. So I'd imagine you're surrounded every day with toys and games and all kinds of cool product that would make us on this end probably have a conniption. What is your day-to-day life as at work as the Transformers TCG global brand manager?
So the way our groups are organized, brand management and game design are the two primary axes in any product. So brand management is the business side, so making sure that the products are profitable for the company, and that we can sell products at a good price point for consumers, so that it's something that they feel comfortable purchasing. It also is the marketing and the communications and PR and everything that goes into that. So marketing, communications, the social media team, they all wrap up into me. And then product development is the other responsibility of a brand manager at Wizards. So product development is identifying what is the right product to satisfy the needs of a certain subset of gamers, a lot of gamers, a very small group of gamers, in such a way that they get to play and enjoy the things that they want to do in the way that they want to enjoy them, and in such a way that the company can be a good business. And then from that, there's a whole bunch of things. It's like working with Hasbro on a pretty much weekly basis, daily basis sometimes, depending where we are in the product development cycle, talking about, okay, so how can we sync up with the toy line? How can we get these characters who aren't in the toy line into the trading card game? What is the proper name for this weapon that a character uses? All kinds of IP sync up stuff like that also rolls up to me.
Okay.
And then, so basically, this is a long-winded way of saying I everything that's not the actual design of the game rolls up to me.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah. So the I don't
So
game
there's
engineers and game developers, the folks that make sure that the game is playable when
Right.
it lands in our hands, and then you and your team are responsible for everything that gets that to our hands successfully.
That's correct, and there's a lot of crossover there.
Right.
So there's another leader who runs the game design group. His name is Charlie Catino. So the lead designer of Transformers is Ken Nagel, who fans of Magic may be familiar with because he's been a Magic game designer for years. They make sure that the play environment is fun and healthy and engaging, and that people want to come back over and over again to find new aspects of of deck design, and new ways to use cards, and maintain so that there's cool things to do over and over again, and that those cool things to do are in a fair and healthy environment.
Right.
And that crossover comes because we don't just design. Game design is not just words on text on cards. It also has to feel true to the character that the game design is part of. So when we create, say, a new Starscream character, we have to make sure that it feels like Starscream and that it does the things that Starscream does. And the game design and the creative design, so the art, the naming, the concept of what the character is, have to be lockstep, hand in hand. Otherwise, it falls flat. And that's one of the things that I think that has been most rewarding about Transformers is how well we've been able to meet fans' expectations of what Transformers characters in card form feel like.
Awesome. Yeah, that rings true with me because Wave 1 Skywarp comes to mind where he diverts damage. He's not going to take a bullet for somebody else, right? That doesn't seem like most Decepticons. So he's going to try to shirk that damage as best as possible, right?
Exactly.
Awesome.
You can see it in product development with things like Metroplex. So the Metroplex toy is the character who turns into a city. And we know that we wanted to, and the toy was physically gigantic. For a long time, it was the largest Transformers toy ever made. And we wanted to capture some of that sort of grandiose might that these Titan-sized characters have. So we figured out a way to make a single card that was about 8 inches tall.
Yeah, how did that go in terms of getting a bit of ahead of ourselves? But that's a fun nugget to think about. How did that back and forth go when somebody finally said, hey, this card's going to be giant?
So it's super easy. So the way it works is someone has an awesome idea and then makes a case for why that idea is good for the brand, why it's good for the players, why it's good for the company, why it's good for Transformers, and then we figure out how we can get it done. Not all ideas make it through. As a matter of fact, most ideas don't make it all the way through the process because we find unanticipated issues, or we were like, oh, that sounded great, but when we actually play tested it, it didn't play as well as we thought. Like that's the iterative design process that is the core of Transformers and pretty much everything that Wizards does.
Right.
But the ones that do make it all the way through, those have seen so much attention and so much love, especially the big weird ones, the ones that are done for the first time, like a card that big, or the combiners, which are the cards that have a hinge in the center so that they can open up and reveal the interior third side. That stuff has gone through so much attention. None of it is I wouldn't say difficult. Sometimes it's challenging, and that's sort of like a different flavor of the same word. But difficult to me is onerous, whereas challenging is, oh, there are these issues. How are we gonna solve those issues? Can we solve those issues?
Right. Yeah. So I know with any sort of development, it's you don't want to talk about what could have been and things that were left on the back burner, because then all the fans want is, oh man, that would have been so great if you released that. Why didn't you do that? But is there anything that you know for sure is probably not doable that you can talk about, or some sort of little inside scoop, funny story of something that maybe we wouldn't see as outsiders looking in as fans?
Sure. So when we were starting the initial development of the Transformers trading card game, the first thing that we did was called system design, and that's where we figure out what is the core group of rules that will govern how this game works. And we had an open call for designs inside Wizards design teams, and everyone from Mark Rosewater, who's the head designer for Magic, to folks who don't even work on game design as their initial as their primary job function, all had an opportunity to pitch to us. And there were some awesome designs. Some of them didn't work. Some of them had this one nugget of awesomeness that we're like, okay, we're going to take that thing and we're going to put it in the bucket, and then we'll figure out how to make the bucket, the things in the bucket work together. But one of the things that didn't fly was, one of my suggestions was, what if we do this as a map-based tactical combat game? And so I had this prototype that was like, your characters had movement and they could move spaces. It was a great design. It was not right for this trading card game, and so it got shelved. But that was one of the like 32 designs that made it through the pitch phase.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so I've played a card game, Colossal Kaiju Combat, that had a very similar system where you moved around a skyscraper and tried to do damage to it. So that's really cool, and it's always interesting to get some of the behind the scenes on something like that.
Yeah, the reason why we didn't, that's probably also important. The reason why we didn't pick that is we wanted the game to feel like a fast clash of Transformers characters. And that was one of the core goals that we had, is the game had to proceed at a fairly rapid pace, and the overall duration of a game was under a half an hour. And those were two of the things that we considered fundamental to the core system design, in order to make this game distinctive and feel like the Transformers brand's sort of characteristic bot-on-bot combat.
So that brings up an interesting point. So as we're now in the third wave, creeping up on the fourth here and Q4 here, how do you continue to keep the fast-paced action among competitive and even semi-competitive or casual play, where people are still going to local game stores and playing? How do you keep that fast-paced action where the goal is either to tend towards, for people making decks and doing game crafting and theory crafting, they tend towards more strategic, more combos. They want to last as long as possible or take their opponent out as fast as possible, so that sometimes, and maybe I'm off here, but sometimes you lose that initial thought, that DNA, once it gets out into folks' hands, just because they find a way around the system.
So fast-paced and strategic play are not mutually exclusive. When we talk about fast-paced, we most want the feeling of fast-pacedness, and the overall duration of the games to be not too long. And different players are going to want to express how they play Transformers in different ways. You've noted a couple of them. There are people who are going to want to play aggro rush decks and just go all out for an immediate victory, and there are people who are going to want to play the control deck game. And we made archetypes and built them into the Transformers game system specifically so those people could have the satisfying experiences the way they want to. So tank decks and as are just one example of a more controlling game type, whereas Insecticons are, and Autobot cars, or some versions of Autobot cars, are very, very fast and aggressive. And that's not only fine, that's what we want. We want people to be able to draw different play styles out of the Transformers game. Where the challenge is making sure that all of that is still possible for players inside the umbrella goals of feels like bots smashing into one another and games don't take terribly long. And that's on us, and that's why we have a play design group who play tests games and provides iterative feedback and says, hey, this card is bogging things down, or this card is unbelievably fast and needs to get toned down. And that's just part of the design process at Wizards.
Right. Okay. No, that's awesome to hear. And yeah, it's the game, no matter how many new systems come to play, the base set of pips that we have now, the game still feels fast because there's only so much you can do on a certain turn. There's a limit to how many actions you can play. There's a limit to how many upgrade cards you can play, the weapons, the utilities, and the armor. So a turn can only last so long, right?
Exactly. And there, when we do design work, when we do the game design work, we want to push the limits. If we're not pushing the limits, things are by default boring, and that's not good for anybody. So we found that for a couple of cards, we'd pushed the limits too much, and so we took some corrective action not too long ago. And that's also core to the way that we manage this game for people. We found that there was a card that allowed you to get too much card advantage in one card play, and so that card was banned. It's the only card we've ever banned. And while that's a rare thing, it is part of the natural process of pushing the boundaries, and that is necessary for exciting gameplay.
Yeah. So I think for those listening, they know RIP swap parts, right?
Yep, RIP swap parts.
So moving into, we've talked a little bit about the development, we've talked a little bit about launch, but I'm interested in the portion that's not the game design part, the part that falls under your wheelhouse and your team's wheelhouse, and that's making an appealing product from the outset. So with any large property, there's a passionate fan base. The Transformers fan base is not unlike the Godzilla fan base, the Power Rangers fan base, video game fans. So with that, people are going to be nostalgic about different periods of time that they remember experiencing the Transformers. So that nostalgia doesn't necessarily appeal to everybody at the Target store, right, on the shelf. So how do you appease the fan base with the IP, but also bring in new players?
I think the Transformers brand does this really well, and the way it constantly reinvents the core characters in the brand. The current set, War for Cybertron Siege 1, was designed hand in hand with the Siege War for Cybertron Siege toy line, and when you're looking at those main characters who appear pretty frequently in the Transformers brand, like Optimus Prime and Starscream and Megatron and Bumblebee, you see different flavors of those characters' personalities in each iteration. And in Prime, they were really going with for Siege, they were going with the Autobot leader. Yes, he's totally an effective and powerful combatant on the battlefield, but he's emphasized in Siege as this is the leader that you need in desperate times. And so we took that philosophy and created a version of Optimus Prime who is specifically and explicitly a leader. He grants abilities to other Autobots on his team. And because of that, we really don't have a lot of difficulty in coming up with new versions of these core characters. And as you know, the balance between how many times does a fan see, a deep engaged fan of the brand see Starscream versus a character who they know and love, who is a little bit more obscure, say the Firecons or a whole host of the thousands of Transformers characters who have appeared over the 35 history year of the brand. And that balance is important to us. So one way is that our starter deck products always are going to have the more recognizable characters because they're touch points for new players. And our booster packs are going to, as a regular part of how booster packs are made, dip pretty deep into obscure characters. And we've done that from set one. Flame War is a pretty obscure character unless you're a hyper engaged fan. She's had one toy in 35 years, and it was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. So it's not even a widespread toy. And there are characters that we've pulled from even more obscure sources. And that is one of the strengths of the trading card game inside of the Transformers brand. Because we print so many cards a year, we can and do and always will go super deep and pull out those fan favorite or obscure characters or single versions of a character that might be obscure. For example, we did a version of Windblade that was based on her Combiner Hunter San Diego Comic-Con toy, where she's not the typical Windblade. She comes armed with a specific weapon and a specific paint scheme that is her precise iteration where she was fighting enemy combiner teams, and we turned that into a card. So I would say ultimately the richness of the Transformers universe helps us keep this variance and diversity in the character roster. It's not a difficult thing for us. It's more difficult figuring out how we are going to get enough characters who are more rare and obscure into cardboard form.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know some fans and myself included can look at something and say, "Oh, that's not the most popular version of the character." Let's say, just for this point's sake, there was the Bayformers, Megatron and Optimus. From a non-initiated fan, somebody just sees it on the shelf. If they see those characters and then they see original G1 art, and you say, "Hey, which one is cooler to you?" The Transformers fan would say, "Oh man, it's got to be G1 art or bust," right? And then somebody who's not initiated would be like, "Oh, these look really cool and futuristic." So striking that balance of appealing to the non-fan and appeasing us, right, is something that I thought would be a little more difficult, but it doesn't sound like it.
So part of this is we are pretty explicitly generations. So we don't dip into any of the movie verse, for example. But each of the expressions of Transformers does have its hyper engaged fans. And while most hyper engaged fans cross over from various iterations, like it's totally possible to be a, say, Robots in Disguise fan, and that's it. I would say the one that is most common to be a hyper fan of one expression, but the exclusion of other expressions, is Beast Wars, and that's really because Beast Wars was Transformers for an entire generation of people. It was the only expression of Transformers, so they grew up with that as Transformers. But all of these generation family expressions of Transformers have enough of the common themes and common visual themes that people who do enjoy the crossover we are able to satisfy them at multiple levels.
Awesome. So dovetailing off of that, so in movies, video games, comics, and traditional games based on a pre-existing license, there's a brand guide that exists. There's a lore Bible that exists. Do you have something like that you and the team work off of that's been provided to you?
We absolutely have that.
Awesome. Is it an epic tome?
It requires a cart.
Awesome.
I exaggerate a little bit. No, there are multiple. Every big brand has brand guidelines, right? Like that's core to being a brand, is that you want the expressions of the brands to have similarity. So Yes, there absolutely are brand and style guides. Our Hasbro, the relationship with Hasbro is fantastic. We talk regularly with the Transformers creative team, the toy design team, and the art department. And I mentioned some of these names before, but John Warden, Chris Nadeau, and Ben Montano are great partners. And so where we where the needs of a physical trading card game create any amount of weirdness, there's a very open discussion. It's like, hey, we have this issue. Here are some ways that we propose to fix it, or ways that we propose to express this part of the Transformers brand or IP. What do you guys think of that? Is there a better way we could do this? And those conversations are natural, and it's really part of working with such a mature brand. People who've worked on this for a long time have the experience of showing Transformers characters, themes, storylines in so many different media that these conversations are pretty awesome to have, actually.
Yeah, and from a player standpoint and a fan standpoint, I feel like there's been a great deal of respect paid to the brand and the legacy just through this card game and through other ways that we interact with the card game. So hats off to you and the team out there.
Thanks. I really appreciate that, because that is our number one guiding principle. It must pass an enfranchised fan's sniff test. Right? We call it the sniff test. Does it pass the sniff test? If it passes the sniff test, we're doing our job. And it has to pass the sniff test on multiple levels and all the time.
Yeah. So with we talked a little bit about obscure characters in maybe a specific paint job or a specific niche appearance. Can you dispel some of the mystique around how the character selection process goes? Do you have a short list you work off of? How does that go?
So this varies whether or not we're doing a throwback set like Rise of the Combiners, or whether we're doing a set that ties into a current on-shelf toy line. So I'll take War for Cybertron Siege, for example. Going back to your previous question, we have the style guide, and it lists the characters who are going to be made into toys, shows their place in the story, talks about the plot, all the things that you'd expect from a style guide. And then we kind of mapped that out. And there was enough content just in the Siege toy line alone that it was more than one set's worth of characters. And then we had these conversations with the creative team back at Hasbro. It was like, well, what if we showed what the characters who didn't make it into the toy line, because we also see the sort of concept development, what the characters who didn't make it into the toy line looked like as if they were redesigned for Siege. And that led to a whole bunch of other conversations, which was like, what cool characters can we bring up to the Siege look and feel style? And that led to things like the Firecons, including the Firecons and redesigning them. Having artist Marcelo Materi, do a modern take of what a modern Transformers character would look like, to update the Firecons. And we had Dan Kana do the Omnibots for San Diego Comic-Con. And those are super exciting discussions. As to the mystique of how do we select characters, a lot of it is what's the right place for a character to go, because characters have distinctive styles, fighting styles, weapons, toy gimmicks, and I think that the largest and most important classification that we do is what set is going to have the right marriage of a character's IP and game mechanics that make the character pass the sniff test. So extreme example is Rise of the Combiners, right? We had the hinged cards mechanic, and we created an entire set just to house the hinged card mechanic and the Combiners characters. But we also threw in a few triple changers just to sort of seed the waters for future stuff. That's the biggest, and by far away the most important, is does the set have the right mechanics to make the character feel right? So there are characters that we haven't done yet, specifically for the reason that the game mechanics that make them feel true haven't been introduced yet.
Okay. So, speaking of, you talked about iterative design, and we've touched a bit on what the DNA and some of the guiding principles of the Transformers trading card game. Has the team considered, and you can say pass if you want, has the team considered anything like scenarios or even like planets or cards that aren't necessarily actions, they're not necessarily upgrades, but they're persistent, like let's say Teletran 1, or things that may have a persisting feeling in the game?
So in wizard speak, we would call them permanents.
Okay.
And yes, we have. Going all the way back to original design, there were a couple of designs that were very mission centric, like sort of like quest centric. And you will see cards like that sometime in 2020.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
And I can't go into more detail of what they look like or how they...
For sure. Yeah.
But that is the game rules system absolutely not only has space for that style of card in game design, it is one that we will be exploring.
Very cool. Very cool. So you talked about the Omnibots, and that's another example of a niche, right? They were a send away, and so those characters were send away toys initially, right? And now they were brought to the card game in a promotional pack. So that's really cool. So to talk about some of those exclusives, typically early adopter exclusives or event items, those are kept exclusive for the life of the product, really to respect the fact that somebody got there first and was aware, and that's a mark of pride. Hey, I got that item, it's awesome. So there's been there's some discussion around the 2018 con pack where for whatever reason, I think I myself was not even aware that the card game was coming out. We missed that wave and have to get it other ways. With that in mind, has there been any sort of talk about a re-release of that pack, or is it kind of just moving forward?
So, has there been talk? Yes, there's always talk. We explore things all the time. We do a lot of what if scenarioing, both on the business planning side. Those cards in that form, as they were exactly there, will not be printed again, specifically because it was an early collector's item. Having said that, we recognize that there are players who desperately want to get their hands on those cards, and I don't have any concrete things to talk about at this time, but we are aware of the players' increasing fervor that they want to get their hands on those cards. And there are lots of ways that we could do this, including print cards that have similar abilities and hold similar spaces in game design, so that people have access to the things that those hard to find cards do. That's one way we could do it. There are others, and yes, we are aware of the fans' pretty strong interest in being able to do the things that Cliffjumper and Slipstream do.
Right. Yeah, I will, for the time being, I will revert to just using some of my extra white cardboard and my amateur art skills.
Having said that, we are less likely to print mechanically unique, super hard to get cards in the future. So, for example, this year there was a really bizarre thing that happened that I can't even go into. But the original plan was that the the Omnibot pack was the one that was going to be sold at conventions all through 2019, and the 35th anniversary Blaster versus Soundwave would be exclusive to San Diego Comic-Con, and that, as you know, is an art variant. There's a mechanically identical retail edition that features the Generations versions of those characters coming out on September 20th. And in the future, now that we know of this really weird thing that happens, that's going to be our plan. That something like a single convention product will be more of an art variant and less of a mechanically unique card.
Okay.
There are a couple of but there's a cutoff where we consider easy enough to get. For example, the release day event card that comes in every in-store play kit are given out at 25 per store that signs up. And while that's a one-day event only, that is a lot of stores around the world, each with many cards. So that is not below the threshold for us.
Right. With Private Smashdown.
That's correct. So you could imagine that the release day kit for Siege 2 will also have a mechanically unique character card to celebrate the release of that product.
Awesome. And I thank you guys for that pack, that care pack. That was a great event that we had here in our neck of the woods. Yeah,
and the in-store play has been really, really positive, not just for the brand, but for community building. It's been assigned to retailers. Starting a new game is difficult, and bringing a new game into your store is a risk for a retailer, when we recognize that. I used to manage a retail store, or part of a retail store, way back in the day, and so I understand it. I've been out of that game for a while, but I remember it's difficult. And every dollar that a retailer sinks into investment into a new product represents risk, and we get that. And the in-store play kits are a way to both affirm to retailers and players that this game's supported at the store level. So the communities that have been constantly growing or springing up anew are really healthy.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about the retail piece of it. Is Toy Fair, the New York Toy Fair, is that in your wheelhouse in terms of attending that and doing a little bit of salesmanship around the Transformers trading card brand?
Oh, absolutely. I've been there for the last 2 years.
Okay.
We showed off Rise of the Combiners to trade at that show.
Okay. So with there's the big three, we'll call them, and one of them is within the Wizards of the Coast umbrella, Magic the Gathering. So what is the sell on Transformers trading card game when this I'm Joe, sales owner or store owner, and hey, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, they bring in what I need. What is Transformers? Why should I stock Transformers? Why should I build a brand around Transformers and sell it to me?
So I think there's two really important key selling points from a retailer's point of view. One is there is a category of sort of action battling trading card game, and the Transformers trading card game is backed by Wizards quality game design, and there are great games out there, but there's a reason why we're the world leader in trading card games, and we've been doing this we originated the category. Mm-hmm. So there's that level of consistency, of store support, of quality of product, and that is critical when you're maintaining that same level of quality, and the cadence is important if you're a retailer.
Yeah.
And a second key selling point is that the Transformers trading card game helps bring in new blood into your store. So there are two ways that happens. One, we've seen Transformers fans who were not previously trading card game players start enjoying the hobby because of the Transformers trading card game. And Transformers fans are legion. it, as one of the literally one of the largest entertainment brands in the world. Transformers has 35 years worth of fan building behind it, and we tap into a relatively untouched part of that fan base, which is face-to-face gameplay, which is also one of the main roles of the trading card game inside the larger Transformers family. And then also, those fans have youngsters, and Transformers was explicitly designed to have strategy and depth inside of the tactical gameplay and the team building and the deck building, but the core turn and the rules of the game was specifically designed to be easy to grok even by a youngster. And that's because we knew that adult Transformers fans were raising a new generation of Transformers fans, and we want to share the love of Transformers in a face-to-face game, in a tabletop game. And so we are tapping into that. Geek Dad, I think, put it really, really great in some of his articles about the Transformers trading card game, where he talked about how this felt tailored so that exactly for the parent of who was raising young Transformers fans as a way to bring the youngster into the hobby. So from a retailer point of view, anything that brings new fans into the hobby and into the store is gold. Like, that's how we achieve sustainability, generation after generation.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Also, I would say, and this is, I think, a little bit less of a KSP for a retailer, but because Transformers was designed specifically and explicitly to be a fairly fast game, it serves really well as a player's second collectible game, because a lot of players enjoy playing one primary game and one other game that they pick up and play. So even if a player is primarily into Magic or one of the other leading trading card games, Transformers is very easily settles into, oh, that's the game I get out and play a few quick games with my friends.
Yeah. And I can speak to, so two of the things you brought up I can speak to is a that rings true in terms of you all being successful is, first off, by just playing the Transformers card game in a public setting, people will look, they're in between rounds, they're opening packs, they're waiting for the next round of Attorney to start. They see the giant cards, they're holographic, all of them are holographic. Oh, what is that? Is that Transformers? Oh, I've seen that. And they get hooked. Our really friendly folks give out starter packs from their doubles. So you've done well there. And then great friend of mine, his son is actually named Orion, based off Orion packs. And he's
Very
young.
cool.
And he definitely put the hurt on some folks at the welcome day for the Siege 1 launch. And he's a fair but firm player. He played ramming speed, and he didn't even ask me to scrap that. He's just like, scrap that, please. I'm like, oh, he's like a 9-year-old kid.
It's funny that you brought up the visibility of the card game, because that was intentional, right? There have been a lot of trading card games. I got into Magic with Antiquities, and I started working at a retail store pretty soon after that. So I've seen a lot of them, and we needed to stand out, and not just stand out in terms of how awesome the gameplay is or how much it felt like Transformers, but we actually literally needed to stand out. And once we had settled on a game system that wanted to start with the characters in play, which, by the way, was so that there could be combat on the first turn, we realized, hey, these don't have to shuffle into your deck, so that means we can do a lot of crazy stuff with them. And every card being foil on its bot side, and the cards being double-sized, commander-sized, for the sort of standard-sized Transformers character, was decisions that we came to pretty specifically so that we would stand out and look fantastic. And as you note, it works.
Yes. Yeah, it's awesome. And I keep waiting for what the next thing will be done, because they're just fun to even just flip through. So they're definitely great eye candy.
So Siege 2, which comes out November 8th, has a Titan-sized card in every sealed display box. And it's Trypticon. I've been talking in a lot of other places about some of the desperate measures that the Autobots and Decepticons the lengths that they go to in order to win the war. Trypticon is one of those Decepticon lengths because he is not the most stable of Titans even on his best day. And so we put one of those massive Titan-sized characters in every single display box. And the reason for that is because of the spectacle. It looks fantastic. And it turned out to be not that difficult for us to do. We had to adjust the box by, I think, like 2 millimeters in each direction to make it fit and snug and safe. And now the box opening experience is Unleash Trypticon. So that's pretty core to who we are now.
Yeah, that's awesome, and definitely goes back to pushing the envelope.
Yeah, Trypticon's plays very differently from Metroplex. If you enjoyed playing Metroplex, you'll probably enjoy playing Trypticon, but they are definitely different deck experiences.
Yeah, I know in a past interview, you said that you were surprised by how long it took the community to latch onto Metroplex and really realize how strong he was. Is there any other character that it's a surprise to you that you haven't seen more discussion around that's secret strong, if you will?
So there's a Thundercracker who gets bonus attack for every action you play. And we were expecting people to find ways to break him a little bit more than they did. There was a deck that was able to take it was part of the swap parts situation, but there was a deck that was able to generate a lot of action plays a turn, and that core is still there. You can't use it to take multiple turns, but you can still take many actions a turn, particularly if you use Red Heat from Siege 1, and Thundercracker can get pretty arbitrarily large for one turn. So that was one character, and I think that there's still untapped potential with him. And then Sunstorm is a character, and I think in the current environment is probably a little bit too fast for Sunstorm, but there are ways to get basically an arbitrarily large hand size in the game. And earlier on, so it's not so much true now, but around the Wave 1 timeline, one of the guys in the office had I think it was a Sunstorm Nemesis Prime deck that basically drew most of the deck really quickly. And so Sunstorm was gigantic, and Nemesis Prime got gigantic quickly because the deck only had, 5 cards in it, and so you were shuffling every combat.
Wow, that's awesome. I know I've tried to no avail with Sunstorm, especially with Wave 3 Skywarp, with a little bit of synergy they have there with that draw power. But sometimes I just feel like I would rather play my actions and my upgrades than get 1 or 2 more attack. But more time in the boiler there to figure that out.
Yep. And depending on when this goes live, one of the folks in the office is going to, I think Matt Smith is going to be writing an article about Soundwave from the Blaster versus Soundwave deck. Blaster was intentionally a little bit more obvious of a competitive design. Soundwave has some pretty strong potential there as well. So Matt's going to be writing an article to talk about how to take best use of Soundwave. Hint, it revolves around Recover Cassette.
Awesome. I can't wait to read that. So with the last bit of time we have here, had just one last question for you, and then I'll give it to you to kind of let the community know what we have going on as a recap. I'm actually surprised by it. There's a fairly large amount of content creators and people that have basically heard the call to arms to join the community and help each other out, so on and so forth. Do you have anything that you haven't seen from the community, from content creators, from even developers out there that are making their own tools? Is there anything out there that you would like to see or think that the community could benefit from?
I think the community is doing a fantastic job. So we're seeing everything from box openings and people playing two-pack turbo, which is cool, fun content, to super deep deck analysis and deck design, tournament reports. I think there was one thing that I would love to see is folks from local stores. And we definitely have seen this, but I would love to see more of it. Folks from local stores celebrating their Energon Invitational qualifier winner and the deck that person played, because there's a lot of cool stuff that we've seen, and we're working to get some of that more out to the community. But that's the only thing that I would say I'd love to see even more of. But the community has been amazing in the amount of content that it generates for such a new game. It's really rewarding watching.
Yeah. And we appreciate the amount of signal boosting you all do for the things that we're doing, and just some of the things that we share amongst each other. Having you guys chime in is always a treat.
Yeah, that level of engagement is important to us. We want to be present for any number of good reasons, right? Like, you got the community, whether you're content creators or people who post online or even upvoting a thread, that is feedback to us. It's not the only feedback we use, but it's critical feedback. Conversations like this, whether they're public like this interview or whether they're one-on-one conversations, are critical for us figuring out, did we do this correctly? Are we meeting expectations? What do people want to see? And that's why you see us physically at conventions. I just got back from Gen Con. I was there with Matt Smith and Scott Van Essen, both from Transformers Design. And we were there specifically and explicitly to talk to people and listen to people. And even more importantly, to listen to people. That's why we're there. That's why you see us popping up all the time.
Well, we definitely appreciate it, and I know it really keeps people engaged. And if the product itself wasn't, right, so we definitely appreciate that. So go ahead. Sorry.
There is one thing that I do want to get out to everybody in the community. So the Energon Invitational qualifier season ends on September 30th. So if your local store is eligible to run a qualifier because they signed up for a Siege 1 in-store play kit and they haven't run it, please let your store know that every store that's qualified to run one already has the event set up for them in WER, which is the Wizards Event Reporter System software. And all they have to do is change the date to the date that they want to run it. It's set by default to the last day of the season. And they can also change if they want to run a limited qualifier instead of a constructed qualifier. They also have the ability to do that. So as we get to the end of the qualifier season, ask your store to run a qualifier if they're participating in the in-store play kit for Wave 3, and because I want to see everybody there at PAX Unplugged.
Awesome, and make sure that you have your member card filled out. You have your what's it called, the
DCI card.
DCI card, and if you have a youngster with you, make sure that you've done that as well, because they do have to have parental consent through that process as well.
Correct.
Yep. So last thing, Energon Invitational, dates and details about Energon Invitational.
So the Energon Invitational will happen at PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, and that comes up on the first weekend in December. You will, even if you're not qualified, there'll be other events there, including last chance qualifiers to play in the main event, but there will also be side events, constructed, sealed leagues, a daily two-pack turbo every day. So whether you're qualified or not, it's an awesome place to come and have fantastic Transformers play at the highest level or at a casual level. And I will be there. I will see everyone there.
Awesome. And then Siege 2 dates and details, and when can we expect the Hasbro Pulse sale to go on?
Sure. So the thing that comes before Siege 2 is the San Diego Comic-Con and Summer Convention products going online at HasbroPulse.com on September 4th. But if you are a Hasbro Pulse member, some amount of that product has been allocated for the September 3rd as a thank you to Pulse members. Do not be alarmed. There will absolutely and definitively be product reserved only for September 4th. So even if you're not a Hasbro Pulse member, you can sign up. You can log on and get one that day. Then on September 20th, Blaster vs. Soundwave will hit your local retail store, the Generations edition, and then we get to Siege Part 2, the conclusion of the last 24 hours on Cybertron on November 8th, which is a Friday, and your stores will be running release events sometime that weekend, the 8th, the 9th, or the 10th. So sign up at your local store for a as yet unannounced mechanically unique character card. And I'm not going to spoil it here because it's something super cool.
Well, Drew, that sounds amazing, and I can't wait for all of that. I'm going to have to get my wallet ready. Thank you so much for joining us for the interview, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. This was awesome, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Awesome. Thank you, and have a great day in Vegas.